Hello, everybody. You are tuned in to the Walk Off Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Justin, here, and I'm joined with Davis and Leroy could not make it here today. So our buddy Jared here is going to step in place. But how are you two doing today?
Doing good, man. Baseball is right around the corner. March Madness going on. NBA, it's a great time for sports, and we got baseball coming up. So, of course, we're excited. It should be a good show today.
Yeah, it's going to be a good show, guys. Thanks for having me on. I'm usually behind the scenes working, but they brought me into the front lines here. Excited for baseball. We're a little over a week away, so can't wait to get talking to you guys today.
Yeah, I'm really excited. We're really getting close. The weather outside here in Baltimore is nice, so that always tells me baseball is close. But we're going to kick off today. We're starting our AL West preview today. We're finally over here in the AL. So we're going to kick it off today with the Texas Rangers. Last season, they came in last in that division. They were 22-38 last year in 2020. With them, I look at their addition losses, and I feel this team has lost a decent bit, but it has definitely gained some pieces for a smaller rebuilding team. It'll be curious to see how 2021 plays out for them. But first off the top, uh, they get DH Chris Davis from the Athletics, the one that can hit the ball, spelled with the K. I think that's going to be a nice addition for them. They're a better bat in a lineup that doesn't have too many. They also added David Dahl, when we talked about earlier in this series when we talked about the Rockies losing him. So starting here with the Rangers, I just don't see too much that looks much different than last year. And the biggest thing for me is they lost the best piece of their team last year with Lance Lynn, who was fantastic for them. So I want to go to you here first, Davis. I want to see what you think about the Texas Rangers off the top of your head.
Yeah, I mean, they're coming off the worst record in the league, 22-38. Was a shortened season. Who's to say they couldn't have maybe turned it around, but they looked pretty bad last year. And I think 2021 will be a year they continue to rebuild, but at the same time, it's hard to get worse than the league worst record. So to see some like small improvements would be good for them in a competitive division that realistically they're probably not going to win. I've said it before with these bad teams, Orioles included. It's having the minor leagues back will be huge. I think getting your guys actually playing in action. So that'll be big for Texas. You got to take small wins away. It's tough to be that bad, and they only have I think 3 top 100 prospects, and they're ranked 21st farm system in the majors. So it's hard to get excited when you have to tank in order to kind of get those draft picks. Unfortunately, we've been through that with the Orioles, but it reminds me of where the Orioles were a couple years ago, just when you hit rock bottom and there's really nothing you can do except go up. So hopefully they can start developing prospects. Some of these guys they brought in this year, I think, are great pieces that they could eventually trade at the near or at the deadline. Gallo's obviously a guy, but I think David Dahl is a great piece to bring in. I loved him with the Rockies. Underrated outfielder who can really hit well. He's coming off a great year, so that could be a guy that starts the season off really good, gets flipped for some prospects, stuff like that's kind of the moves they need to make this year. Nate Lowe is a nice little move they made at first base. Still only 25, so I think they'll probably stick with him. And the bullpen is pretty rough. That's something I think an area I have written down here. I think they should improve on. I think overall Texas is going to improve win percentage wise, seeing as it was really bad last year, but it's just still going to be a year you measure and improving for the future and getting pieces to build around. So it's hard to say. I mean, I don't think they're going to get worse, but yeah, I certainly do think Texas will finish last in this division. I think it'll be, like a 60 to 65 win season and a fifth place finish.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Davis. We talked about it earlier off camera that really the Rangers outfield looks pretty decent, right? You got your Joey Gallows, you got your Chris Davis, your David Dahl, Willie Calhoun, you got your prospects Leody Tavares and Josh Jung, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the stretch. But other than that, it's kind of the same old Texas team, right? You got Rugen Odor back at second base. You're moving Isaiah Kiner Falefa to shortstop after trading Elvis Andrus away to the Oakland A's, who we'll talk about later. Ronald Guzman at first, showing a little bit of pop in his bat. Catching is really lacking for the Rangers. Their starting catcher projected is Jose Trevino. They have young Sam Huff coming up, which is a good sign for them. And the pitching's a little rough, guys. I'm not going to lie. Pitching's a little rough, especially in the bullpen, like Davis said. Jose Leclerc is their best reliever, and I believe he's hurt. He might miss a little bit of time to start the season. They got a nice lefty in Brett Martin coming up. But other than that, I don't see much that could really help you out in the bullpen. Their starting rotation is weaker now. They had, of course, Corey Kluber and Lance Lynn and Mike Minor last year trying to make one last run for it. They still have Kyle Gibson, and they just signed Mike Fulton-Nevich, and they got Dane Dunning, which is an underrated pickup for that Lance Lynn trade. So I think the Texas Rangers are going to finish in 5th place, like Davis said. Not too much of an impressive farm system though. Josh Young is their top prospect, and he's in the 60s or 70s in the top 100. So yeah, Texas is going to be a pretty bad team. That's coming from an O's fan and an O's group. We think the Rangers are going to be pretty bad in that top. The one thing going for them, they're going to get a top 3 draft pick this year, which is good for their farm system. And they kind of remind me, I don't know about you guys, but they kind of remind me of the 2018 Orioles, right? You still have a little bit of star power. You have your Manny Machados and your Jonathan Scopes and Joey Gallo and David Dahl, but at the end, your farm system's not very good. You're going to have to try to build that up. So a good comparison there. But yeah, 5th place finish for the Rangers. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, it's hard for me to really put them anything over that. And it's, again, what we've said multiple times on this series is they're playing in a pretty good division. They're seeing teams like the Athletics and the Astros multiple times over, even the Seattle Mariners, who we'll talk about, who's really building that team. I think there's just a lot more talent in this division than there is on the Rangers staff. And that is something that I think needs to be addressed. That point you made about looking like the 2018 Orioles is a very good point, because you look at their lineup just on a piece of paper, and there is very good pieces there. Ronald Guzman is someone who I thought he could just hit the cover off the ball. When you look at Leody Taveras, he's one of your younger players, definitely is one of the things to look forward to there. But beyond that, there's just not much. It feels to me they kind of gutted that rotation with Lance Lynn. And even if Corey Kluber only pitched in that, he pitched in 1 game last year, obviously as healthy, that's someone that would be good for you. That Dane Dunning move, I think, is a good move. You're replacing some good production with Lance Lynn, and maybe not so as good, but definitely some good production there. He did pitch to a 397 last year. If you look at the rest of the rotation, that's going to be pretty serviceable for the Rangers. However, like I said, I just don't think there's too much to look forward to other than the future at that point, and where they're going to have to build up this farm system. Again, like when you look at the rest of the teams in this division specifically, have done really well. And a big part of that with me is also, when I look at their bullpen, is just not going to take you very far late in games. And again, when you're playing teams like the Astros with a great bullpen, or the Athletics, who had the best bullpen last year, there's a lot to keep up with in this division, and I don't think they can do much. But for the sake of Ranger fans, you have possibly 2 of the most exciting pitching prospects out of college. Looking at their, they have one of the highest draft picks. They do have the number 1, I believe. They're definitely going to start building that farm system starting this year with that draft, and definitely going to see some trades coming out of Texas, I believe, during the season. So we'll keep our eye on that. For Ranger fans, it's another one of those cases of take the little wins you can. There won't be too many, but definitely want to start looking forward, to the future there. But we're going to jump over, when we're talking about looking forward to the future, we're going to talk about the Seattle Mariners, who their fan base might be one of the most unlucky in all of sports. If you sit down and you look at this team, it seems like maybe they are starting to turn things around. First off, we know they brought back James Paxton. Seattle Mariner fans love James Paxton. They love that move. I do think that's going to be a good move for them in general. They have the rookie of the year last year coming back, and Kyle Lewis, and that outfield just paired with a lot of really good young prospects. Pretty sure that whole outfield is going to be just top tier prospects when you have Kyle Lewis and Taylor Trammell, and then you have Jared Kelenic is going to play a decent bit this year. This is a lot more exciting team looking at them this year than the Rangers. But Jared, I'll go to you first. I want to know what you think about the Seattle Mariners in 2021.
Yeah, Justin, if I'm a Seattle Mariners fan right now, going through all the heartbreaks of not making the postseason for the longest time and just going through rebuilds and rebuilds. I'm truly excited for this year. And their outfield is really good, like really good. They got Kyle Lewis, like you said, the rookie of the year last year, commanding center field. Mitch Haniger. Let's not forget, Mitch Haniger is a really good ball player for the Seattle Mariners. And then you have the young guys, Jared Kelenic and Taylor Trammell coming up. I'm really excited for those two. And a young prospect by the name of Julio Rodriguez, who is supposed to be the next big thing for the Mariners. He can hit all over the field. I think he's a switch hitter as well, if I'm not mistaken. The infield is, it's pretty average. You got Kyle Seager, who's been there from the start. He's probably your oldest player there, and he might be a lifetime Seattle Mariner. Who knows, right? First base looks pretty good. Evan White, he's only going to get better. Young 24-year-old there. He did pretty well last year. Dylan Moore is a good utility guy to have around the field. He could play pretty much everywhere. I'm not sold on the middle infield, though, with J.P. Crawford and Shed Long there. I don't know how good they're going to be. But the Mariners have an older catcher in Tom Murphy, who's actually been pretty solid for them behind the plate. Luis Torrens will be their catcher of the future. He's going to be their backup. Pitching's a little interesting because the starting rotation doesn't look as bad, right? You got, like you said, James Paxton. He's probably going to be, if not Marco Gonzalez, the opening day starter. Those two are your 1-2 punch. You got Yusei Kikuchi, who some people have forgot about over the last couple of years. He's been in the majors. Andres Munoz is on the IL right now after having Tommy John, so he's going to be pretty good for you. Bullpen's a little sketchy, right? Just it's kind of the same thing like the Rangers. They got Kenyon Middleton from the Angels. They signed Ken Giles, but he will be out for this year at least, I believe, with Tommy John or some sort of surgery. But the main goal for the Mariners is to keep building up that farm system, right? You're probably going to see James Paxton get traded at the deadline, right? So we could possibly see Mitch Haniger as well dealt. So Mariners, great future. I think they're going to finish in fourth place, right above the Rangers. They're not there quite yet, but they will be in a couple of years. Davis, this team could be one of the better teams coming up in the near future.
Yeah, we were just talking about it before the show started. I mean, if I'm a Mariners fan, I'm very excited for the future, especially considering what they've been dealing with the last 10 or so years. And I do think within the next 3 to 5 years, this could be a playoff team. And I'll just kind of start backwards with this one. I do think they'll finish fourth. I think, 10 to 15 games under 500, but the future is really bright. It's just this division's a little too competitive for where they're at right now, I think, but it's not a long shot to say they can make a run, because I do think they'll have some ups and downs this year. Some winning streaks. When you got that much young talent, you can really get on a roll. So, they finished third in the West in the shortened season last year, and all their hitting categories were pretty bad last year, and it's something they need to improve on. I do think Kyle Lewis is the truth. I think, he's a former first round pick, rookie of the year in his first year, and everything I saw last year looks like he's a guy that they can really build around. And that's not even mentioning some of the outfielders they have coming up. And I think as far as offseason moves, they were relatively quiet. There was really nothing to write home about. But I'd much rather see them deal older players to get more prospects than deal prospects to try to win now. It's just not going to happen with the Mariners right now. So I like the approach they had. It's just they were respectively quiet. As far as some of the moves I liked, Rafael Montero will help that bullpen. And you mentioned Middleton, another guy. Giles is kind of like a long-term piece. It is Tommy John he's recovering from, so he's not going to play this year. But again, as more prospects come up and they get better, that'll be a guy that's there. I liked Marco Gonzalez last year. I think he's a great pitcher. I think this pitching staff is kind of underrated. I think 2021 will be a good gauge of where they're at and if they need to bring more pieces in or develop more starting pitching. And you can kind of just go from this, because this year sort of expectations are low. Continue to see what you got. I think it'll be a fun year for the Mariners, though. They're finally going to see some good players, some talent, maybe some winning streaks here and there. Like I said, I think they will compete for the division. I don't think they have the longevity to hold on to the Astros, Angels, A's as the season goes on. But to finish fourth in this division and maybe get close to 500 or 10 to 15 games under 500, I think is a pretty good stepping stone to where they could be in the future.
Yeah, I really do think the Mariners have a lot of promise going into 2021. This could be one of those odd scenarios where they come in fourth and they could still have right under a 500 record, which generally that's not a fourth place record. But when you have the Athletics and the Astros and the Angels, who we all have projected to be above them, you can see how that happens. But when I look at their farm system, that is just what's so exciting. And for a team that, when you look at what is their projected lineup right now, they have 5 of their starting 9 were acquired at some point via trade. So this is definitely not one of those teams that ignores that aspect of baseball. And when you pair that with a lot of these young prospects they're going to have coming up, like we've talked about Julio Rodriguez already, the number 4 prospect in all of baseball. Then right behind that, you have Jared Kelenic, who was number 6. So having 2 players in your top 10 in all of baseball is pretty exciting. Along with, like we talk about, Taylor Trammell, who's going to play in the outfield this year. And that's going to help that starting pitching and even the bullpen a lot with improved defense in the field behind him as well. And then, of course, they have Emerson Hancock, who I believe is projected to debut 2022. So there's a lot going on for this team in the future. For a team that has a very bad past, I think you are in a very good spot as a Mariners fan. As odd as that is to say, going for 4th place is pretty good, because this is also a team that could lose a lot of games and, again, have another one of those higher draft picks and just even more so build up that farm system that really is, pretty solid and is really on the right track. So I think the Mariners are going to be exciting to watch this year, especially with the few players you want to watch, as we had mentioned. But next, we're going to jump over to just one of the most confusing teams in all of baseball in the last 10 years, the Angels. It seems like the better their lineup is on paper, the worse they fare. But this season, there's a lot to like about the Angels, especially in their pitching rotation. We saw Dylan Bundy come over and basically be their ace last season. My heart broke a little bit saying that, but they're in a really good spot with him. They also got Alex Cobb in that deal where they gave the Orioles Jahmai Jones. You have Andrew Heaney's, they have slotted in there as their number 2 starter. Of course, you have the most exciting player in all of baseball, not named Mike Trout, and his name is Shohei Otani, who I think we're all really hoping for a healthy year from him, but that would be very, very productive from the Angels if he stays healthy, obviously on both sides, because he's a great pitcher and then arguably one of the better DHs in the game. But they definitely made some moves this offseason, as we expect for a Los Angeles team. They brought over Jose Iglesias via trade with the Orioles, who won both parts. That was a great trade for us as Oriole fans and the Angels. They're getting a very, very good shortstop who just hit the ball like he couldn't stop hitting it last year. They also bring in Dexter Fowler in the outfield. I mean, not your superstar move as it once was with the Cubs bringing him in, back in 2016, but that's a good defensive move on that part. Obviously, they still have the best player in all of baseball in center field with a fat pocket now. But I do think this is an exciting team. We're going to get to see the whole year of Anthony Rendon over there at third base, which anyone that watches baseball knows when he's locked in, he is one of the best players in the game. So I think there's a lot of firepower coming out of this lineup. And it's just going to be a matter of this team, what it always is does it produce in a 9-inning game on the field? So that's going to be my biggest thing for the Angels this year, is will they be able to produce the way they're supposed to? Because I do think this is a division winning team, but come October, we could be talking about them in a much different sense. So I'll go to you first, Jared. I want to know what you think about the Halos over there in Anaheim.
Yeah, the Angels have the potential to be that surprise team in the AL that could win the division, right? They're going to go most likely with a 6-man rotation this year. At the top, you got Dylan Bundy. He's going to be your opening day starter. But then you have Shohei Otani right there, who's been having a tremendous spring training, both pitching and batting for them. Like you said, Justin, one of the most exciting players in the game. But then you got the 3, 4, 5 roles where you can go Andrew Heaney, Jose Quintana, and Griffin Canning, and even Alex Cobb, right? This is actually a pretty solid rotation. I wouldn't mind having this rotation on my team. Griffin Canning's a young guy who's going to be pretty good. The more reps he gets, Andrew Heaney's been pretty good the last few years. But the one downfall, I feel like I'm a broken record, but the bullpen's a little question mark for them. And it's been like that for the last couple of years. They finally got a true closer in Raisel Iglesias from the Reds. He's going to help their bullpen out. They got Ty Buttrey in there, lefty Alex Claudio. Junior Guerra is going to be your long man. After that, it's kind of a question mark who you're going to take to Anaheim coming out of spring training. They did upgrade the catching position, which they needed to, in Kurt Suzuki. He's going to be your starting catcher. First base, you got the machine, right? Albert Pujols locked down. But they also have a young first baseman by the name of Jared Walsh, who people should look out for. He might be in a bench role this year because the DH situation with either Pujols or Otani, you never know what that's going to be like. But guys, the Angels could have the best defensive middle infield in baseball with our good friend of ours, Jose Iglesias at short and David Fletcher at second. Fletcher, to me, is one of the most underrated players in baseball, right? Duke can get on base, has a great glove up the middle. And then you have top 3 third baseman in the game in Anthony Rendon, who's going to score runs. But, guys, the outfield is where it's at for the Angels, right? You have the best player in baseball in Mike Trout in center, Justin Upton hanging it up in left, and Dexter Fowler, who we forgot they acquired from the Cardinals. Some of us may have forgotten that, and he's going to be pretty solid. They're going to start Joe Adell in the minors starting this year, which I don't know if I necessarily agree with that much, but it'll be good for him to get his reps down there. And they have one of the best managers in baseball in Joe Madden. Let's not forget that too. Angels could be that sneaky team. Davis, I don't know about you, but I think this team could finish first or second in this division. It's really a toss-up.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, I really think this could be a team that, well, could really surprise some people in this division and maybe in the American League as well. I do think perhaps the biggest disappointment in 2020 was the Angels for me. I mean, after bringing in Joe Madden, Anthony Rendon on a massive contract following a great World Series run with Washington, they were in the basement of the West all season long and finished 4 games out of Texas. I mean, that's pretty bad when you're doing that. So I think, the rotation was really bad. They had Bundy was kind of a surprise, seeing as he wasn't doing particularly well with the Orioles. But then you had Tehran was a big disappointment. Now he's gone. But you bring in Jose Quintana. I think he's still got some juice left in the tank. I think that's a pretty big acquisition. Not to mention Alex Cobb. So it's clear that they're trying to bring in veteran guys with experience who can pitch right now and built for a playoff run as well. So I think they plugged some leaks in the bullpen. Raisel Iglesias, probably one of their biggest signings of the offseason. And then we saw what Jose Iglesias can do last year with the Orioles. Everybody knows he's a defensive stud, but he really brought his bat last year. And that trade, like you said, Justin, really worked out for everybody. Orioles got some prospects out of a veteran. And I think Iglesias, there's no reason to believe after what we saw last year that he's not going to continue to have another great season in 2021. So I'm excited for him. He seems to be doing really well. He's kind of at the, high point in his career. I think that'll help. Rendon's numbers dropped pretty bad last year. We talked about that in the past. We also talked about how a shortened season can have an impact on that kind of stuff. And maybe it didn't paint the full picture, but I think LA season will come down to whether he can get back to that, elite form he was in that playoff run. And when he was an all-star with the Nationals. So, and then Otani is the other big question mark coming off an injury. They want him to return to pitching in 2021. I just want to see if he can return to being a, elite batter like we know he can be. And I think that'll be a big indicator of whether they're around 500 or around winning the division. So I'm expecting a major bounce back. I think the Angels will be above 500. I think they'll be, right in that wild card spot and could really push on the A's and Astros with 80 to 85 wins. And that might be enough to take this division.
Yeah, Justin, before you go, I just want to say, I think we all agree that if Shohei Otani can pitch to the caliber we know he can and can hit 20 home runs like we know he can, he could be an MVP in the American League. Like, there's no doubt about that. He is one of the most exciting players in baseball just because of the fact that we don't see players like this much anymore. Babe Ruth did it back in the 30s. So yeah, this guy could be a potential MVP candidate, but he's gonna have to fight his teammate Mike Trout for that. So, Justin, what do you think about this team?
They're a really interesting team. Shohei Otani, again, is one of the biggest stories really so far this spring. He's a player I've said to you guys before, I just want to see healthy so bad. I think the Angels and all of their fans feel the same. Considering you can have Mike Trout in your outfield and you can arguably say maybe the most exciting player on your team isn't even him, then I think you're in a good spot. But this is to me, a very one-dimensional team. Again, when you look at their bullpen, it is just not there. And as Oriole fans, we know as well as anyone in those few years when we were very, very good, what was the biggest part of that team was the bullpen. And then you watch these teams that make the run in the playoffs and in the World Series, they always have that bullpen to sustain themselves, especially when it's a 162 game season, as opposed to last year with a 60 game season. But they have just a handful of players that are really the deciding factor. Like Davis said with Anthony Rendon, if he's hot and he's playing like he's supposed to, he's going to be arguably one of the best players on your team. And of course, someone like David Fletcher, like you said, is very underrated. He's always on base, which, as we know, you can't hit an RBI without the guy in front of you on base. Then they have someone like Rendon, who's just an on-base master, as well as Jose Iglesias, who we saw could definitely take some pitches, hit the ball. If he did like last year, he's going to have a well over 300 on-base percentage. That's going to be a great addition to that team. And I don't even think Angel fans truly understand that yet until they can see what he is doing day in and day out. Because I will tell you, last year when we acquired him, I said, well, you might as well make him the designated shortstop. And then he turned around and hit the ball like he was Ichiro. And then when I look at someone like Kurt Suzuki, I really like that move, because another big downfall of this team last year was their starting rotation and their pitching in general. I think a smart veteran catcher does almost as well for his pitching staff as bringing in another good pitcher, and we saw what that did with that rotation in Washington, especially with their bullpen. Granted, he split that time with Yan Gomes, but especially in the playoffs, he was catching majority of the time. You saw what that could do. And I do think that helps the starting rotation in the bullpen itself coming into 2021. But I do think the Angels are a sleeper team. If they are playing correctly, they definitely have a shot at this division. And at some point, like you said, Jared, Joe Adell is going to start in the minor leagues. I don't know why that is, but he is just one of the most exciting prospects in all of baseball. He is lighting up spring training, and he's not someone that is at the top of the list of, granted, he's number 9 in the top 10. That's pretty good. I think we'd agree with that, but he's not one that's just getting that, publicity as the rest of these prospects. And people will be sorry for that. And that's going to play a part. And when he comes up, he's going to flourish. And I think that's going to be very good for the Angels. With an already good lineup, they're adding a really good 5-tool player to that as well. So that's pretty exciting. But enough with the Angels here. We're going to take it over to Jared, and he's actually going to give us our 7th inning stretch.
I'm back in my comfort zone, boys. This is where I shine on the show. And we're going to start the stretch off like we do every week with the weekly trivia question. Guys, Davis, Justin, this is your chance to get up on Leroy. You guys are 1 point behind him. He's not here. You guys can do it this week and tie it up. Here we go. Weekly trivia question for this AL West edition of the stretch. During the 2009 MLB draft, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim selected Mike Trout with the 25th overall pick. But some might have forgotten that the Halos also had the 24th overall pick in the draft. What player did the Angels select with the 24th overall selection, aka the pick right before Mike Trout? Think about it.
It's a tough one.
I'll give you a hint.
I don't remember. I've seen it so many times, and I don't.
He's still playing, but he's not playing in the AL West.
Got me stumped. I've seen it too. I can't think of it.
We had 0 guesses from the boys. Once you hear it, you're going to be like, oh, yes.
Trying to think of who debuted around 2011.
We're going to need some final answers here, boys.
Was Trumbo drafted by them?
I don't know. Was he?
That's going to be my pick. Screw it.
Going with former Oriole Mark Trumbo, okay? Justin, what do you think, man?
Drafted in 2009 by the Angels.
I will give you one more hint, and I hope this doesn't give it away.
Okay, I'm just going to go away.
I'm
just going to go and say it was Simmons.
Andrelton Simmons?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thought it might have been
Okay. The hint was, now that your answers are locked, we see this player quite a lot every year. So the answer was
in the East. All right.
he is in the East now, and here we go. The person selected by the Angels right before Mike Trout, the Oriole killer, Randall Grichuk.
Grichuk. Yep.
He was picked, the pick right before Mike Trout, and along with 23 other people who were seemingly better than Mike Trout at the time. And if that's hard to believe, right? Randall Grichuk, Oriole killer, we know about that from last year, but that was the answer. Nobody got a point this week. Sorry, boys. Leroy is still in the lead with 3 points. All right.
I did not know he was drafted by the Angels.
Yeah, it's hard to believe because, we know he started his major league career pretty much with the Cardinals when he got up. So that was a difficult one. I tried to stump you guys this week, but we have to get into the stretch. So here we go. This is your 7th inning stretch. All right, guys. Astros pitching prospect Forrest Whitley has officially undergone Tommy John surgery after battling arm soreness that was diagnosed as a right UCL sprain. Whitley also had a forearm problem last season that led to an early shutdown at the Astros alternate site, and he has been sidelined with shoulder and oblique injuries in past years. Beyond just health woes, Whitley was also issued a 50-game drug suspension in 2018. He will officially miss the entire 2021 season. Tough one for the Astros. He's a big prospect for them. Rangers' top prospect, I told you we were going to get to this, Josh Young, will undergo surgery to repair a stress fracture in his foot, per Evan Grant of the Dallas Morning News. The injury likely puts Young on the shelf for 6 to 8 weeks. A generalized timetable projects his return to come a couple of weeks into the minor league season, and the 23-year-old is the 63rd ranked prospect in baseball, per MLB.com. And lastly, we just got done talking about him. Is it possible for the best player in baseball to get even better? Well, according to Mike Trout, yes. When talking about his swing, Trout says he's found and fixed some things that he's been struggling with, quote unquote, struggling with over the past year. And despite his personal struggles, Trout still hit for .281 batting average with 17 home runs and 46 RBI in 53 games last season. So guys, watch out. The greatest player is only going to get better. Justin, take us away.
That's a really, really scary for him to say that. That's awesome. Don't get me wrong, but that's definitely a scary sight for the 29 other teams. But speaking of the other teams, we're going to jump over here to a team that me and Davis rode with all last year. I wanted to put this out here. Leroy will hear this later, but me and him projected the Oakland Athletics to win that wild card series against the White Sox, to the dismay of the rest of this group, and we turned out to be right. So I wanted to put that out there before we talk about the Athletics. But in classic Athletic fashion, when you look at their free agent losses, it almost takes up a whole page. As you know, this is a team that flips around personnel quite well. However, I do think this team lost a lot of really big parts of the team from last year, most notably being Liam Hendricks, the reliever of the year last season, absolutely dominant closer, a big reason they were able to get out of that wild card series with the win. So he's gone. He actually now went to the White Sox. So that's someone we're going to see a decent bit. Former MVP candidate Marcus Semien, who came off a real down year last year, but he is no longer there with the team. That's someone who was always going to be serviceable for them. Another one of their longer tenured players, which for the Athletics, you don't see that too often. But over here on this addition side, I put this down as addition because you're getting Matt Chapman back at third base. The second you have Matt Chapman at third base, your overall team fielding percentage is going to go up a handful of points, and your team is just going to be better in general. You're getting a line drive home run hitter guy that doesn't strike out too much back in your lineup. That is huge for them. I think that was a big part in them losing in the playoffs last year. Obviously, not having arguably your best player is going to make a difference. They bring in Trevor Rosenthal from the Padres. I think that does well in replacing Liam Hendricks. Obviously, when you lose the best closer in baseball last year, that's going to make a difference. That was a good move there, bringing him in and fill that void. They also brought in Elvis Andrus. He's going to come in and play a shortstop in the absence of Marcus Semien. But this is a team, again, their lineup isn't actually too much different than last year. They also brought in Mitch Moreland, big home run hitters. We know we've seen a lot of him, but this lineup is very exciting. I'm real excited to see Sean Murphy in a full season. I think he kind of came out of nowhere and surprised everybody. Even throughout the playoffs, was just that clutch factor in his bat was on another level considering his age. He's so young. It's a very exciting catching prospect for them. You still have Mark Cannon in the lineup, again, serviceable guy that's gonna do pretty well. Matt Olson coming off a very down year last year, who I've always just thought is one of the better left-handed hitters in this league. I'm projecting him to definitely break out again coming up in this season. Probably see him hit the 30 plus mark on home runs. You have Tony Kemp at second base, who's just quicker than Dash incredible. I mean, he's just very fast. Definitely is someone that does well on your team in the multiple ways you can use him as well. So we know that's what the Athletics do so well. But I'll go to you, Davis, first. I know you'll have a lot to say about the A's. I want to know what you think about the boys.
Yeah. The A's surprised a lot of people, certainly not me, but by winning the AL West in 2020. Ultimately falling to the Astros in the playoffs is a tough one. With the extended playoffs, it's tough to lose to a team you beat in the division. But they had a good year, and the Chapman injury is tough. I mean, I really think they could have. I think they could have made a run at the AL, but it's hard to say with a team that only has so many hitting pieces like they always do. And they just were incredibly efficient in 2020 with their pitching, which they always are. It's the same old thing. And, I do think they lost a lot in free agency. I think that's going to hurt them. That being said, we've seen it time and time again. Just Billy Beane finds a way to make it work in Oakland. But I do think, you mentioned them, Justin. The big two for me are Marcus Semien and Liam Hendricks. Those are big losses that it's tough to just put somebody in that can just replace them like it's nothing. And I think that'll hurt them in 2021 a little bit. And Joakim Sawyer was another free agent that walked, a veteran guy. And that back end relief is a big part of Oakland's game. They have guys like Lou Trevino and Jake Dykman that I think are going to step in and fill those late relief roles. I hope they, prove me wrong and just turn out to be these studs like Oakland always does. So I think there's hope there. And of course, Oakland always has a plan for this stuff. So I'm sure someone will step up. And, I was waiting to talk about the Elvis Andrus trade a little bit when we were talking about Texas. I think the A's kind of finessed that a little bit. I'm gonna be honest. I like Chris Davis. He's done a lot for Oakland. He's been a great hitter, but I think he's unfortunately starting to trend down on his hitting numbers. And I think if you see Billy Beane trade a guy like that, a veteran who is, still near the top of his game, if he is declining, I think the writing's kind of on the wall, unfortunately. Certainly I don't want to see that, but I think that's kind of the mindset in trading him. And I think Andrus, has a lot to prove. I think he's been kind of stuck in Texas for a long time, and I think he'll come out hot. I think he's still got some left in the tank. He struggled in injuries in 2020. I mean, his numbers definitely reflected it. So Oakland bought in low. And that being said, he's only 1 year off from a really good 2019. He had 70 RBIs, hit just under 300. If he can return to anywhere near that form, I think that's a win-win for Oakland if Chris Davis, in fact, is declining. So that's a trade I think will make or break the season for Oakland, honestly, with losing a guy that's been a big piece of their team for the last few years. But again, getting Matt Chapman back is the big one. I mean, he's an elite third baseman, and defending is great. He's looked awesome in spring training, which is good to see. And this is his team he can take it where he wants. So I think that, the hitting is going to be big because the pitching is always near the top of the AL for Oakland. It's going to come down to guys stepping up that can fit in for Semien and some of the production they lost. I thought LaStella was a guy they'd probably re-sign. He seemed like such a good Oakland player. Unfortunately, he walked. So we'll see. There's always guys that are going to step up, and there's always going to be the guys that continue to perform, like Chapman. Two guys you mentioned Tony Kemp. I like Mark Kanya as well. Those are two guys I think will really have big years. It'll be tough. It'll be close with Houston, and of course we mentioned we're all kind of on board with the Angels, but I think the A's get around 80 wins, 85 wins, and we'll see where that takes them. But I think the 1-3 in this division is going to be close, but I think they'll be right near the top. I have them at second, but it could easily be first and it could easily be third. So I'm going to pick them to go second in the West here.
Yeah, I say this every year. The A's are just a fun team to watch. I mean, if you're anybody but an AL West team fan, you love the Oakland A's, right? It's hard not to. They got probably the best corner infield in the game with Matt Chapman and Matt Olson. I'm huge on Matt Olson. I tell the guys this all the time. He's one of my favorite players. just quietly underrated. I think that's the West Coast effect kicking in because people don't see as much of him. Matt Chapman's a top 5 third baseman in the game, of course. Somebody I want to see get a little bit more playing time, though, Chad Pinder. This guy had an amazing postseason last year.
Virginia Tech alum right there.
Yeah,
Shout out the Hokies. Yeah.
Yes. Virginia Tech, good, solid all-around player, can play in the outfield, play second base. I think he'll platoon with Tony Kemp there at second base, hitting lefties. Steven Piscotty, Ramon Laureano, and Mark Cannon are going to run that outfield. We just went over the infield pretty good. I'm kind of upset that they weren't able to keep Marcus Semien. I think Marcus Semien was a good player for them. He did have a down year, but let's not forget the year before that, he finished 3rd in AL MVP voting. And I think a full 162 would have helped him there. I was sad to see him go. Mitch Moreland's going to lock down that DH role pretty well for them. Those two bats, Matt Olson and Mitch Moreland right there in the 4-5 hole, it's pretty powerful right there. Sean Murphy, I'm really high on this guy. Had a really good postseason as well. They also have Austin Allen doing the backup catching, and he was one of their top prospects as well. But guys, the bullpen, I'm really excited for, actually. They did lose Liam Hendricks. I get that. The best closer in the game other than Josh Hader, in my opinion. But you make up for it with Trevor Rosenthal, 100-mile-per-hour guy. I really liked him in San Diego. I think he rejuvenized his career there. You get a big veteran arm in Sergio Romo. Like David said, you got Trevino, Diekman, the swinging lefty. But they also re-signed Yusmeiro Petit, which was pretty big too. And they also got pretty long guys in there. J.B. Wendelton, Dalton Jeffries is the top prospect of theirs. He might be up this year. Rotation is actually pretty nice. One of the top pitching prospects in baseball, in Jesus Luzardo. I think he's going to be a good arm for them. He needs to work on that location a little bit. That 4-seam fastball changeup combination is going to be pretty good. Another underrated guy last year, guys, Chris Bassett for them. He might get the opening day nod if they haven't announced it already. But then you got solid guys in Mike Fiers, who seems to throw a no-hitter almost every year. Sean Manaea's up and down, but he looks like he could be good in Frankie Montas. Guys, I'm high on the Oakland A's. It's tough for me because I want to see the Angels make either first or second just because they've had a few years of struggle. I think the Oakland A's have a real shot of winning this division. They're going to have to get through Houston's lineup, obviously. But the swinging A's, man, it's hard not to like them.
Yeah, these Oakland A's are really exciting. I'm glad you brought it up, Jared, talking about the starting rotation. I mean, their starting rotation just looks really, really solid. If you just look at last year, which again, the 60-game season, we don't put too much stock in it, but just look at their top 3 from last year with Chris Bassett, Jesus Luzardo, and then Sean Manaea. I mean, Chris Bassett threw for 2.29 ERA in 63 innings. It's a small sample size, but 63 innings is a decent sample size to start looking at the numbers at a 2.29 ERA in the division where he saw the Astros and the Angels and the Dodgers and the Padres just over and over in that 60-game season is pretty impressive. Then you'll get Jesus Luzardo, who we all said last year was one of the more exciting prospects in baseball. And we're going to see him in a full season this year, when last year he still had a 4.12 ERA in 59 innings as a young pitcher like that. I think is pretty impressive and is a really, really good sign for the A's because like we saw last year, they were a team where their lineup benefiting from their good pitching. And if you have the players now like Matt Olson, if he can bounce back and have a good offensive year, Ramon Laureano, we know he can hit the ball pretty well. Then you have Sean Murphy all year. He showed he can hit the ball well and work with these pitchers, behind the plate. I think there's a lot of upside to the Oakland Athletics. I think a lot more upside than there is downside. But of course, there's always going to be the downside. And then even then, talking about the rotation, one of their top prospects right now is AJ Puk. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right or not, but he's another pitcher who you're probably also going to see in this starting rotation at some point. And I think if you could have Chris Bassett and then 2 prospects like Jesus Luzardo and Puk in there, if he can pitch well, I think you're in a really good spot. And for a team like the A's, that's a very good spot. The way they develop, then for all you know, they're going to get 2025's MVP out of a paperclip and a rubber band ball at the end of this year. So they're always going to be exciting to see how they develop these players. And after 162 games, how they progress, especially with now, I think this is a big thing. They got over that hump last year of not being able to win a playoff series or elimination games. For your big time players in Oakland, like the pitchers and people like Matt Olson and Matt Chapman, I think that plays a big part in the mantra of the team. Being a team that's always overlooked, they're not going to come out and have MLB Network having them projected to win, 95, 100 games, but we know at any point they very well could do that. But we're going to jump over to this last team here, the Houston Astros. Of course, I think we all could say a lot about this team, but we're going to keep it down to the baseball part of it. As much as I want to go off about them, I will not. But first, looking at the Astros, a big addition here is Jake Odorizzi. I feel like it took forever for someone to sign him. Then to fall to a team like the Astros, I think that was a really good move, especially with the fact that you're going to lose Justin Verlander again for this season because of that Tommy John. I think that was a really good move to throw him in that starting rotation. That's going to work out well for them, as well as they kind of lost Michael Brantley for like 45 minutes. And then, we found out that move to Toronto wasn't really bring him back on a 2-year deal. And right there, you just have the best hitting eye in all of baseball. Him alone in that batter's eye is going to win you a few games. And then you look at a division like this AL West with teams like the Astros and the A's and the Angels, that's going to play a big part. But obviously, we know their lineup really has not changed much. You still have Jose Altuve there at the top spot, who had an absolutely awful year last year. Karma is hell of a thing, Jose. So I do project him to come back and be a lot better this season than he was last year when he hit to 219, which for him is just completely unheard of. You still have Alex Bregman at third base that, all things aside, is going to be in the MVP running as long as he can put a glove on his hand. Carlos Correa, kind of the same way at shortstop. You're going to see Yordan Alvarez again, who came out in 2019. That AL Rookie of the Year was just absolutely electric. He was hitting the ball like he's been in the league for years and years. So that's a good sign to see him back in that lineup there. And then Kyle Tucker is one I specifically put a star next to him here, because that is a very, very exciting player that the Houston Astros showed us a lot of last year. And now that he's going to get to play a full season, that is someone that's going to be very exciting. I think is going to do very well for the Astros, and they need it after they lose George Springer. Obviously, you're losing production all over the field with Springer in terms of defense and offense. So that's going to be a big thing for the Astros this year, seeing Kyle Tucker. But I'll go to you, Jared, first on this one. I want to know what you think about Houston Astros.
Yeah, I think the loss of George Springer is probably the biggest loss of free agency, right? Miles Straw is their center fielder right now. He's not George Springer, right? He's not George Springer. Right field, they don't re-sign Josh Reddick. You're going to put Kyle Tucker there, which I'm fine with. Kyle Tucker had a really great year in 2020 in that 60-game season. You're getting Eric Jordan back. He's going to be your primary DH with probably the most underrated, underappreciated outfielder in baseball, and Michael Brantley coming back. That's huge for them. Dude does nothing but hit and field. I mean, he's consistency all over. Their infield is probably the best in the American League West. You got Bregman, Correa, Altuve, Yuli. I mean, can't get much better than that, right? Offensively and defensively. That left side is really going to carry them. Correa had a nice year and a nice postseason last year, but like you said, karma's a real big thing, and Jose Altuve felt it, right? He's going to need to get back on the train there for the Houston Astros. Bregman kind of had a little bit of a down. I mean, for him, it's a down year, right? Kind of heated up a little bit in that postseason. But guys, even though all the Astros had all this stuff going on with them and the scandal and whatnot, they shoved their foot in a lot of people's mouths, making it to the ALCS, right? They were a series away from going back to the World Series. So pretty impressive there. They got a nice bench core with Aledmys Diaz and Abraham Toro. I just think that's going to help them a lot. Their catching duo is really nice as well. Martin Maldonado and Jason Castro, a righty and a lefty. So, of course, Castro started his career there. Rotation, pretty good, I must say. If they had Justin Verlander, it would be better. And we don't know the future of Justin Verlander, right? Coming off of Tommy John at the age of 35, 36, I think. But you got one of the most exciting pitchers to watch in the league is Zach Greinke as your opening day starter and your ace. They signed Jake Odorizzi, which was a big move for them. They needed to do that to lock down that rotation. Lance McCullers, a young guy, nasty curveball. And then you got the young guys in Christian Javier, Jose Urquidy, and Framber Valdez. But of course, Valdez fractured that finger on his throwing hand, so he might be out for a little while. It's hard to bet against the Astros, guys. I mean, they're such a good team still. And they've done a good solid job of bringing up their young guys, right, with the Kyle Tuckers and the Yordan Alvarez's to prepare for the future of this ball club. We don't know where it's going to be after this year, right? Correa is a free agent. Bregman's going to be a free agent, I think, soon. So it's going to be hard to tell. They lost Springer. That's huge. But their lineup is still powerful enough to win this division, and I think they will. Davis, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'll touch on a couple points that I agree with that both of you made. As expected, Jared, you said the Astros had a really rocky 2020 season following the big scandal. And, if we would have seen fans in the stadiums, it would have been a real treat. But
it's going to be brutal this year.
Yeah, and it realistically, that is going to actually impact them this year. But, that being said, I mean, they had ups and downs, but they really turned it on late in the year. I mean, they made a nice run. Coming into the extended playoffs as the 6th seed. And, objectively, it was an impressive run at the end of the year. And that core of players they have is still so solid. I mean, the obvious big loss is George Springer, who I think elevates Toronto into a dark horse in the American League. We'll get into that in a couple episodes, but no one's going to be able to replace that production. You can't just bring in like, oh, we have this minor leaguer that's ready to beat George Springer. It's just not going to happen. But that being said, I mean, I think Houston's one of the few teams that could lose him, and we're still talking about them possibly winning the division or being a wild card team. And I think says a lot about the core they've built over the past 5 to 10 years. And they bring in some guys that you bring in Jason Castro back as a veteran guy, he a former Astro, and re-signing Brantley, I think you almost had to do with the Springer departure. Kyle Tucker is an in-house replacement for Reddick. He hit 268 last year, pretty good guy. Big jump in 2021 could be a realistic thing for him. They didn't bring any off-season signings that could replace Springer, like I said. But you mentioned Miles Straw. I think he could be a solid guy. I know some people are saying he could be the big breakout guy in 2021. He is, I think, one of the fastest players in the MLB, and he's, a utility guy that'll be pretty good for them. He's still only 26. But like you said, and no matter who you bring in, it's not going to be Springer. So you might as well try a young guy you got and see what he can do. Lost some guys in the pen, but I think they actually improved overall by last year, bringing in Ryan Stanek, Pedro Baez, Steve Chiswick, and then Odorizzi is a huge pickup. It's interesting to see the Astros, who have been such they've been a powerhouse on both sides of the ball, but for them to lose hitting and then, add pitching in the offseason, it's kind of a move I didn't see coming. I thought they would try to either just re-sign Springer or replace him somehow. So to see them shift towards that, I think is kind of a sign that they're confident in the players they have on offense. Like you said, that infield is still probably the best in baseball. And just to not really address the Springer departure, I think is just they're sticking to their guns and, beefing up the pitching, which you mentioned Greinke. I mean, he's still an ace. McCullers is a guy I think that rotation is still better than most teams, even without Verlander. And probably better than it's close with Oakland. But I mean, in this division, that's a really good rotation. So I've always thought of Springer as kind of the most important guy to this little dynasty they've had the last 5 or so years. So I think it's a big loss. I think it's going to hurt them. But I mean, they still have so many pieces that led them to their World Series and led them to playoff runs. And I think the loss will hurt them, but that core is still there. It's just foolish to not predict them to be near the top in this division, especially with Oakland losing some guys. We don't know what we're going to get from the Angels, right? So I think Houston's got to be the favorite for me. I see them at 85 to 90 wins, and I could be close though with the Angels and A's kind of right on their tail. I think it could come down to the last week of the season, but it'd be hard to say the Astros don't make the playoffs, either winning this division or as a wild card. There's just too much still there, even without Springer.
Yeah, with the Astros, with all that stuff aside, I mean, this is truly their division to lose. I do believe that they would win the division. Even if they don't, I do think they get one of the wild card spots. But like I said, it really is their division to lose. They obviously have the pieces to make a run. My big thing with this team is as they go forward into the season and get later in the season, if they start heating up and get some of these pieces back, like the Framer Valdez back in their pitching staff, they're going to be a better team in August and September than they're going to be in April and May. And how many times have we seen a team like that be the one that comes out and makes the run in the playoffs? I mean, we saw kind of a similarly built team to the Astros do that exact thing and use those pieces that I think the Astros built up here to beat the Astros. When you looked at the Nationals and the rotation and what they were able to do with their bullpen, especially mid-season, I think the Astros are in a good spot there. I think that back end of their bullpen is still going to be pretty good. I wouldn't say one of the better, but they'll definitely be up there. You still have Ryan Presley as their closer, who last year still was solid. He's always kind of been up and down, but in a 60-game season, I think it kind of showed the downs a little more than the ups. Is he still threw 343 last year with 12 saves? I mean, 12, that's what, a fifth of 60. He saved a fifth of the games played. So that's a good sign. They still have that good bullpen. Blake Taylor last year pitched 218 and 20 innings. Again, small sample size, but those things do matter. And of course, their lineup is just going to be good offensively. And I think if their pitching can hold up to their lineup, then they are a really dangerous team. Whether Zach Greinke's up in there in age or not, he's one of them that his production hasn't wavered too much as his age has gone up. If anything, I think he's been as dominant here in Houston as he was back in the day, with the Royals. So that's really exciting for them. Jose Urquidy was someone last year I really liked and is very underrated. And then they also have they'll be bringing up and pitching Brandon Baylock. I think I pronounced that right. That's their 4th overall prospect. So again, another young guy that's coming through their system that not a lot of people know of, but as we know the Astros, they know how to use these young kids. So that'll be pretty exciting to see for them. For Astros fans, it's going to be a long year. You guys, their team deserves it, but it's going to be a long year with these, as we've seen how it has been already this spring with fans in the stands. But with that being said, I do think the Astros turn around and put their foot in our mouths again, but I'm still going to talk it. But I do think they have the potential to make a run. Honestly, I think we see them again in the ALCS. As much as I don't like to say that, I think that is true. But in terms of final predictions, I'm going to go with the Astros here, going to win with, believe it or not, I think the Angels can come through and get that number 2. They're going to be fighting with the Athletics for the wild card spot, who I have at number 3. And then back there, the Mariners are going to be, like I said earlier, that odd team that'll be right under 500, but they're going to come in 4th with the Rangers. I think going full steam ahead into a rebuild at some point this season, going to lock up that 5th spot. I'll go to you, Jared, next. What are your final predictions?
Yeah, kind of along the lines of you, and I think of all of us, I got the Rangers at the bottom. Obviously, they're going to be a top 3 draft pick this year. There's no doubt about it. Joey Gallo will most likely be traded at the deadline. Just get more prospects building up there. Seattle Mariners are going to be in 4th. They got a bright future ahead, probably one of the brightest in all the majors, but they're still not there yet. Here's where it gets tricky. I still think the Angels are going to be in 3rd. I mean, I don't think you're going to be able to pass Oakland right now. Not yet. They're going to have a good rotation. They actually might finish close to Oakland's record and maybe make that 2nd wild card spot, but it's going to be hard with the teams in the AL in general, with Toronto, Tampa, Chicago, Minnesota. All right, it's going to be hard. But they're going to be in 3rd place. 2nd place is going to be the Oakland A's, I think. With a full 162, I think the Astros are just going to beat them in 1st. But my bold prediction for the AL West, Matt Olson will hit 40 home runs and drive in over 100 and win the AL MVP. That's my bold prediction. With the Astros, of course, being the champs and clinching the AL West again, they're probably going to win over 100 games with that lineup. So that's my final predictions. Davis, what do you think about that?
Yeah, nothing too much different. I think, obviously last place got the Rangers. I do think this is a very crucial year for their front office to flip some of those guys they've got, keep building prospects and get that farm system up farther because they're just going to stay in the basement if they can't. I think, Mariners will be a really fun team to watch. I'm going to tune into some of their games, but they'll be fourth place. This is where it's tough. I think the Angels will either be first and surprise everyone or just drop to like third around 500. I do have them, a little over 500. I don't think they're there yet with the Astros and where the Astros and A's are at, just off of recent success. So I have them third. I got the A's at second in like a wild card spot, 85 wins or so, maybe 90 wins. I don't think two wild cards come out of this division because I think we might see that out of the AL East too, another team coming from there. So A's in second, but close to the Astros and making a playoff push at the wild card. And the Astros, I think, are going to pull away in the last month of the season, win about 90 to 100 games, like you said. And I think that core that they have, even without Springer, is just too good to not win this division.
Yeah, I like the insights, boys. But before we set you guys off here, of course, as always, I have my Today in Baseball history. Ironically, Davis might not like this one as much, and he'll see why. But back in 2009, we're not going too far back for this one. Ichiro, then Mariner, hit a two-run, two-out single in the top of the 10th inning of the World Baseball Classic Championship as they were playing South Korea. It was a tie game at that point because in the bottom of the ninth, it was Yu Darvish, back then, young kid, pretty young back then, gave up the tying run in the ninth inning for then Ichiro to come in and save the series in the top of the 10th inning. That was their second straight World Baseball Classic victory. Then, as we know, Japan has dominated that tournament as long as it's been around.
I love Ichiro, so my boy Yu was just trying to help him out. That's all it was.
A little friendly love there between the two.
Yeah, he knew it was up.
Yeah, he set it up for him. If
That's
someone
crazy.
just told
That's a
you
really good team.
it wasn't the ninth inning, he would have been fine.
Right.
But, well, there we have it. That was our AL West preview. Of course, next time we're going to jump over to the AL Central as we're getting closer to opening day and finishing up these division previews. But make sure you tune in. We hope you guys enjoyed. Let us know what you all think about the AL West and your predictions. But for now, it is time to walk it off.